The massive space station called Nexus Prime floated in the darkness between stars like a metal city. Inside its biggest meeting room, creatures from across the galaxy sat around a huge circular table. Their faces showed fear and worry as they talked about the enemy that was eating their worlds. Admiral Zethkar stood up from his chair. His reptile skin was dark green, and his yellow eyes looked at each council member. He had led the Saurian Empire's fleets for 50 years, but had never faced anything like this. The insect creatures called the Vexthul Swarm were destroying everything in their path. They ate entire planets and turned the matter into more of their kind. 12 of our member species are gone, Zethkar said in his deep voice. The Vexthul bioships adapt to our weapons in hours. Our fleets cannot stop them. Ambassador Krisa of the Aquarian Collective moved her blue tentacles nervously. Her people had always been peaceful. They studied art and music while other species built weapons. Now their beautiful water worlds were being consumed by hungry insects. We must evacuate more systems, she said. Save who we can. The crystalline being called Telvara sparkled as she spoke. Her people, the Velthari, were made of living crystal that could think. Our analysis shows the Vexthul will reach the core worlds in 6 months. We need to prepare refugee ships. Around the table, other alien leaders nodded. The gaseous Nebulons floated in their containment suits. The robotic Mechani calculated evacuation routes. Everyone was planning to run away. In the observer section, Captain Jake Morrison sat quietly. He was human, which made him different from everyone else in the room. His weathered face showed no emotion as he listened to species that were millions of years older than humans talk about giving up. Morrison wore a simple blue uniform with silver bars on his collar. His ship, the Defender, was small compared to the alien vessels docked at the station. It carried only 200 crew members, but they were all volunteers who had come here to help. The human species was new to the Galactic Confederation. Earth had joined only 50 years ago when alien explorers found their small blue world. The other species thought humans were primitive. They had no energy shields or plasma weapons. Their technology was simple compared to the advanced civilizations around them. The humans should help with evacuation, Zethkar said, looking at Morrison. Their cargo ships can carry refugees to safe sectors. Several alien heads turned to look at the human captain. They expected him to agree quickly. After all, what could one primitive species do against an enemy that had defeated entire galactic fleets? Morrison stood up slowly. He was not tall compared to some aliens, but something about him made the room go quiet. His brown eyes looked directly at Admiral Zethkar without fear. We didn't come here to run, Morrison said in a calm voice. The room fell silent. Ambassador Krisa's tentacles stopped moving. Telvara's crystal body stopped sparkling. Even the Nebulon's gas swirled more slowly in their suits. Captain Morrison, Zethkar said carefully, your species is brave, but the Vexthul have destroyed civilizations far more advanced than yours. It would be wise to help save lives instead of throwing them away. Morrison smiled, which made several aliens uncomfortable. Humans showed their teeth when they were happy, but other species found it threatening. Admiral, with respect, you don't know much about humans, Morrison said. We've been fighting wars since we learned to pick up rocks. We've fought each other, our environment, disease, and anything else that threatened us. Running away isn't something we do well. The alien council members looked at each other with confusion. This small, primitive species was talking about fighting an enemy that had consumed 12 advanced civilizations. Your weapons are chemical projectiles and nuclear bombs, said Commander Velth, another Saurian officer. The Vexthul bioships heal faster than you can damage them. Maybe, Morrison said. But you're thinking like civilized people. We humans haven't been civilized very long. We remember how to be savage when we need to be. Admiral Zethkar's reptilian features showed doubt. "What are you suggesting, Captain?" Morrison looked around the room at all the alien faces. Some showed fear, others confusion. A few showed interest. "I'm suggesting you let us try something different," he said. "Give us the coordinates of the next Vexthul target. Let us show you how humans fight." The room erupted in multiple alien languages as species discussed this strange proposal. Finally, Zethkar raised his clawed hand for silence. "Captain Morrison, if your people wish to sacrifice themselves, that is your choice. But understand, no one expects you to succeed where our combined fleets have failed." Morrison nodded once. "Understood, Admiral. We'll be in touch." As the human captain walked out of the council chamber, Ambassador Krisa whispered to Telvara, "Do you think they know something we don't?" The crystal being's body flickered with uncertain light. "I don't know. But I've studied their history files. Humans are the only species that has fought wars continuously for their entire existence. Maybe that means something." Outside the station, the small human ship Defender prepared to return to Earth with a message that would change everything. 3 days later, space itself seemed to tear open at the edge of the Kepler 442 system. The alien observers, watching from their safe distance, expected to see a few dozen primitive human ships emerge from the crude hyperspace tunnels. Instead, they watched in shock as 800 human vessels materialized in perfect formation. The ships looked nothing like the elegant curved vessels that other species preferred. Human ships were angular and blocky, covered in thick armor plating, and bristling with weapons that looked designed for one purpose: destroying things. They moved through space like a pack of metal predators. Admiral Kate Sullivan stood on the bridge of her flagship, the Columbia. She was a woman in her 50s with gray hair and scars on her hands from years of military service. Around her, human officers worked at control stations that looked primitive compared to alien technology, but they moved with the efficiency of people who knew their jobs perfectly. "All ships report ready, Admiral," said Captain Rick Barnes, her communications officer. He was younger than Sullivan, with the quick movements of someone who had spent years flying fighters in Earth's military. Sullivan nodded as she looked at the tactical display. The Vexthul bioships were already moving toward the inhabited planet. In the system, they looked like massive insects made of metal and flesh, their surfaces pulsing with alien life. Each one was the size of a small city. On the Saurian observation vessel, Commander Velth watched the human fleet through his ship's sensors. He had expected maybe 50 ships at most. The sight of 800 human warships made his reptilian blood run cold. "They brought their entire space force," he whispered to his aide. "These humans are either very brave or very stupid." The aide studied the human ships more closely. "Sir, their weapons are all kinetic. No energy shields, no plasma cannons, just projectile weapons and missile systems." Veloth shook his head. "Primitive weapons against bioships that can heal from energy damage. They'll be slaughtered." But something about the human formations bothered him. Other species fought in careful, organized patterns that followed military doctrine developed over thousands of years. The humans moved differently. Their ships spread out in loose groups that seemed chaotic, but somehow coordinated. Lieutenant Commander Lisa Chen worked at her station aboard the Columbia, analyzing data from previous Vexthul battles. She was a xenobiologist who had studied alien life forms for most of her career. Now she was looking for weaknesses in an enemy that seemed impossible to kill. "Admiral," she called out, "I've found something interesting in the alien battle reports. The Vexthul always adapt to energy weapons quickly, but there's no data on how they handle sustained kinetic bombardment." "Meaning?" Sullivan asked. "Meaning no one has ever tried shooting them with enough bullets," Chen replied. Colonel Sam Martinez stood near the tactical display, studying the approaching enemy. He commanded the human marine battalions, soldiers trained to fight in the worst conditions imaginable. His weathered face showed the confidence of a man who had never seen a fight he couldn't win. "Ma'am," he said to Sullivan, "my people are ready for boarding operations. We've got breaching charges that can cut through their biohulls." Several alien observers monitoring human communications nearly choked when they heard this. Boarding operations against Vex-Thul vessels had never been attempted. The insides of the bioships were filled with acid and toxic gases that would kill most life forms instantly. "Colonel," Sullivan said, "your people understand this is basically a suicide mission?" Martinez grinned, which looked fierce on his scarred face. "Admiral, my Marines volunteered for this assignment. They knew what they were signing up for." The Vex-Thul fleet began to accelerate toward the planet. Their bioships moved in the flowing patterns that had terrified galaxy after galaxy. They had never encountered serious resistance. Every species they had met either fled or died quickly. Admiral Sullivan watched the enemy approach and felt something that the alien observers couldn't understand. She wasn't afraid. She was excited. Humans had been preparing for this kind of fight their entire evolutionary history. "All ships," she broadcast on the fleet channel, "weapons free. Show them what Earth is about." The human fleet surged forward like a pack of wolves. Their engines burned bright blue as they accelerated toward the Vex-Thul bioships at speeds that made alien military doctrine experts nervous. No civilized species fought by charging directly at their enemies. Captain Amy Rodriguez commanded the destroyer squadron on the fleet's right flank. Her ship, the Phoenix, was smaller than the enemy bioships, but fast and heavily armed. She had spent 10 years fighting pirates and rebel forces in Earth's outer systems. "All destroyers, attack pattern Delta," she ordered. "Hit them hard and fast." Fighter pilot Lieutenant Johnny Hayes launched from the Columbia's hangar bay along with 200 other small attack craft. His fighter was a sleek metal dart bristling with missiles and cannons. Unlike alien fighters that relied on elegant maneuvers, human fighters were built for aggressive close combat. "Eagle Squadron, form up on me," he called to his wingmen. "Let's see what these bugs are made of." The alien observers watched in fascination as hundreds of human fighters swarmed toward the Vex-Thul fleet. They moved in patterns that violated every rule of civilized warfare, jinking and weaving unpredictably. Commander Velth studied the tactical display with growing unease. "Their fighters are moving like they're drunk," he muttered. "No, sir," his tactical officer replied. "They're moving like predators. Random patterns to confuse targeting systems." The first human missiles reached the Vex-Thul bioships and exploded against their armored hulls. The alien observers expected the attacks to be absorbed harmlessly like every other weapon that had been tried. Instead, the bioship shuddered under the impacts. Pieces of their organic armor blew away into space, dark fluid that might have been blood leaked from the wounds. "How is that possible?" Velth demanded. His science officer worked frantically at her controls. "Sir, the humans are using depleted uranium warheads. The kinetic energy alone is massive, but the uranium is also radioactive. It's poisoning the bioship's healing systems." Admiral Sullivan smiled as she watched the first successful hits. "All ships, target confirmed. Continue the attack." The human fleet opened fire with everything they had. Railguns hurled metal slugs at nearly the speed of light. Missile batteries launched nuclear warheads. The space between the two fleets lit up with explosions and tracer fire. For the first time in their expansion across the galaxy, the Vex-Thul swarm met an enemy that wasn't afraid of them. The battle erupted into chaos that no alien military academy had ever taught. While other species engaged enemies at long range with careful, methodical attacks, the humans closed distance like wild animals hunting prey. Their ships dove straight into the Vex-Thul formations, guns blazing. Captain Amy Rodriguez pushed her destroyer Phoenix through a gap between two bioships, her reinforced bow cutting through tentacles and organic matter. Her point defense guns created a tunnel of destruction as she flew through the enemy formation. Alien observers watching through telescopes couldn't believe what they were seeing. "She's ramming them deliberately," Commander Velth said in disbelief. "That's not warfare. That's madness." But Rodriguez knew exactly what she was doing. Her ship's heavy armor was designed for this kind of fighting. As she emerged from the other side of the formation, her weapons tore massive wounds in the bioship's sides. The Vexthul tried to adapt like they always did. Their bioships began changing their hull composition to resist the human kinetic weapons. But the humans didn't give them time to complete the process. Lieutenant Johnny Hayes dove his fighter straight at a Vexthul spawning chamber, a massive bulge on the side of a bioship where new creatures were grown. His missiles had been depleted. His cannons were jammed, but his fighter still had fuel and momentum. "Eagle leader to all fighters," he called over the radio. "I'm going in hard. Follow my lead." His wingman, Ensign Maria Santos, watched in amazement as Hayes flew his damaged craft directly into the spawning chamber. The explosion tore a hole the size of a building in the bioship's side. Green fluid poured out into space like blood. "You crazy fool," Santos whispered, then followed him in when her own weapons failed. One by one, human pilots who couldn't fight anymore used their ships as guided missiles. It was a tactic that horrified every alien observer but devastated the Vexthul. Fleet Commander Alex Foster led the first boarding operation in galactic history. His marine assault shuttles were ugly, blocky craft designed for one purpose: punching holes in enemy ships. They carried shaped charges that could blast through any known material. "Boarding teams, prepare for breach," Foster ordered as his shuttle approached a wounded bioship. The shuttle's drill nose punched through the organic hull like a spear. Foster and his 20 Marines poured into the alien vessel wearing chemical suits that protected them from the acid atmosphere inside. Sergeant Kevin O'Brien took point as they moved through corridors that pulsed like the inside of a living creature. The walls were covered in slime that tried to digest their equipment, but human gear was built tough. "Contact front," O'Brien called as they encountered their first Vexthul warrior. The creature was like a giant insect with razor claws and acid, spit. But O'Brien had fought worse things in Earth's jungles. His assault rifle put 3 uranium core bullets through the creature's head before it could react. Behind him, his squad advanced with the methodical precision of professional killers. On the alien observation deck, Ambassador Creasa watched the boarding operation feeds with her tentacles wrapped around herself in horror. "They're fighting inside the bioships," she whispered. "How are they surviving in that environment?" Her aide checked the data feeds. "Ma'am, their armor is resistant to acid and toxic gases. They've designed their equipment specifically for hostile environments." "But why would anyone want to fight in such conditions?" Creasa asked. The answer came as they watched Sergeant O'Brien's squad reach what appeared to be a neural cluster, one of the bioship's distributed brains. Instead of trying to analyze it or capture it for study, O'Brien simply placed a high explosive, charged next to it, and stepped back. The explosion sent shockwaves through the entire bioship. Its movements became erratic as part of its nervous system was destroyed. Admiral Zethkar received constant updates from his observation ships. Each report was more incredible than the last. "Sir, the humans have successfully boarded 12 bioships. They're using explosives to target the creature's nerve centers." "Impossible," Zethkar replied. "No one has ever successfully boarded a Vexthul vessel." "Sir, the humans aren't following standard boarding procedures. They're not trying to capture anything or gather intelligence. They're just destroying everything they find." Dr. Lisa Chen worked frantically at her analysis station aboard the Columbia. She had been studying Vexthul communications, trying to understand how they coordinated their attacks. What she discovered changed everything. "Admiral Sullivan," she called out excitedly, "I'm intercepting Vexthul transmissions. They're afraid." Sullivan looked up from the tactical display. "Afraid of what?" "Of us," Chen replied. "Their communications. are full of panic signals. They've never encountered a species that treats warfare like we do. They're calling us the Death Seekers and the ones who embrace destruction. Lieutenant Colonel Gary Phillips coordinated with the fleet's artificial intelligence systems from his command center. The human AIs were simple compared to alien technology, but they were learning Vexthul patterns faster than the creatures could adapt. All ships target package update, Phillips broadcast. The AIs have identified weak points in the bioship hulls. Concentrate fire on the neural junction areas. The human fleet adjusted its attack patterns instantly. Unlike alien fleets that required lengthy coordination meetings, human forces could adapt their tactics in real time. Captain Derek Murphy's heavy cruiser Yorktown unleashed a salvo of experimental weapons that made alien scientists question the laws of physics. Instead of the refined energy weapons favored by civilized species, humans used crude but effective antimatter charges that tore reality itself. The Vexthul Queen ships, massive creatures that had never been seriously threatened, began broadcasting distress signals. For the first time in their expansion across the galaxy, they were encountering a species that seemed to enjoy combat. Major Claire Thompson deployed her strategic weapons teams in suicide attacks that violated every principle of civilized warfare. Her pilots flew fighter bombers loaded with nuclear warheads directly into the feeding apertures of planet-killer bioships. Thompson to all pilots, she broadcast on the squadron channel. This is what we trained for. Make it count. Her pilots responded with enthusiasm that chilled alien observers. These humans weren't just willing to die for their cause, they were eager to take their enemies with them. The tide of battle began to turn as human tactics proved devastatingly effective. The Vexthul had evolved to fight civilized species that followed logical patterns and tried to minimize casualties. Humans followed no such patterns. Sergeant O'Brien's voice crackled over the communication channels as his team reached another neural cluster. O'Brien to Foster. Package delivered. This bug won't be thinking much longer. The explosion that followed crippled another bioship, sending it tumbling helplessly through space. Admiral Sullivan watched the tactical display with satisfaction. The Vexthul fleet was in full disarray, their coordination broken by the loss of so many neural clusters. All ships, press the attack, she ordered. Don't give them time to regroup. The human fleet surged forward again, their damaged ships, still fighting with a ferocity that made the galaxy's observers realize they were witnessing something unprecedented, a species that had turned warfare into an art form. The Vexthul response to their mounting losses was swift and terrible. 3 massive shapes emerged from hyperspace, each one larger than a moon, with tentacles that stretched for thousands of kilometers. The planet killers had arrived. These were the Vexthul's ultimate weapons, bioships so large they could consume entire worlds in days. Their arrival had always meant the end of resistance. Every galactic fleet that had ever faced them had fled in terror. Admiral Zethkar's voice crackled over the communication channels to all ships in the area. All vessels, full retreat. The planet killers cannot be stopped. Save yourselves. Pyatir. Alien fleets began their escape procedures, their elegant ships turning away from the massive bioships that blocked out the stars. They had seen these weapons destroy civilizations. There was no shame in running from certain death, but Admiral Sullivan's response made every alien in the system stop their retreat preparations. All ships, target the big ones, her voice carried calmly over the fleet channels. This is what we came for. Commander Velth nearly dropped his datapad. Did she just say to attack the planet killers? His aide checked the communication logs. Yes, sir. The humans are actually accelerating toward them. Captain Derek Murphy pushed his heavy cruiser Yorktown to maximum speed as he led the charge toward the nearest planet killer. His ship looked like a metal insect compared to the massive bioship, but his weapon systems were charging with power that made space itself distort. Murphy to all ships, he broadcast. We're going to show these things what human engineering can do. Behind him, the human fleet formed up for an attack that violated every principle of military common sense. You didn't attack something 1,000 times larger than your biggest ship. You especially didn't attack 3 of them at once. But humans had never been known for following common sense in combat. Major Claire Thompson prepared her strategic weapons teams for the most dangerous mission in human military history. Her pilots were loading their fighters with antimatter warheads that could crack planets. The weapons were so dangerous that just arming them required special clearance from Earth Command. "Thompson to volunteer pilots," she announced over the squadron channel. "This is a one-way mission. Anyone who wants to back out, do it now." Not a single pilot left their fighter. Instead, they began final weapons checks with the calm efficiency of people who had accepted their fate. Dr. Lisa Chen made a discovery that changed everything. She had been analyzing Vexthul communication patterns when she noticed something extraordinary. "Admiral," she called excitedly to Sullivan, "the Vexthul are broadcasting fear signals. They're actually afraid of us." Sullivan looked up from the tactical display where she was coordinating the attack on 3 planet killers. "What exactly are they afraid of?" "Us," Chen replied. "They're calling us an illogical species and the ones who seek death. They've never encountered a race that treats combat as an acceptable solution to problems." The revelation spread through the human fleet like wildfire. The most feared enemy in galactic history was afraid of them. Commander Alex Foster's boarding teams had penetrated deeper into Vexthul bioships than anyone thought possible. They had discovered that the creatures' nervous systems could be disrupted by crude human explosives in ways that sophisticated energy weapons couldn't match. "Foster to all boarding teams," he broadcast. "We've found their weakness. Hit the neural clusters hard and fast." Sergeant Kevin O'Brien led his squad through corridors that pulsed with alien life, their boots splashing through pools of organic fluid that tried to digest them. His chemical-resistant armor was scarred from acid attacks, but it held. "O'Brien. To Foster," he called over the radio. "We've reached the main brain cluster. This thing is huge." The neural cluster was the size of a building, a massive organic computer that controlled part of the bioship's functions. O'Brien and his team placed enough explosives around it to level a city block. "Fire in the hole," he announced, then triggered. The detonation. The explosion sent shockwaves through the entire planet killer. For the first time in its existence, the massive bioship felt pain. Lieutenant Colonel Gary Phillips coordinated with human AI systems that were learning Vexthul weaknesses faster than the creatures could adapt. The artificial intelligences were crude by galactic standards, but they specialized in pattern recognition and target acquisition. "Phillips to all ships," he broadcast. "The AIs have mapped the planet killer's neural networks, transmitting target coordinates now." The human fleet received the targeting data and adjusted their attack patterns. Unlike alien forces that required complex coordination, human ships could adapt their tactics in minutes. Captain Steve Wilson prepared his missile cruiser Denver for the most dangerous shot in naval history. His ship carried experimental antimatter torpedoes that could tear holes in space-time itself. The weapons were banned by every civilized species in the galaxy. "Wilson to Fleet Command," he called to Admiral Sullivan, "requesting permission to fire experimental weapons." "Permission granted," Sullivan replied without hesitation. "Light them up." Wilson's antimatter torpedoes streaked across space toward the largest planet killer. When it hit, the explosion created a wound in reality that consumed the bioship from within. The massive creature simply ceased to exist, leaving only a dark spot in space where it had been. The alien observers watched in stunned silence as the humans achieved the impossible. They had just destroyed a planet killer with a single shot. But the humans weren't finished. Fighter Squadron Commander Linda Green led a pursuit mission that followed retreating Vexthul ships into hyperspace itself. Using their crude but effective faster-than-light drives, human fighters emerged in Vexthul staging areas and began systematic destruction of spawning facilities. "Green to all fighters," she broadcast as they attacked enemy installations. "Burn everything. Don't leave anything alive." Her pilots responded with the enthusiasm of people who had found their perfect job. They weren't just fighting to survive, they were fighting to win completely. Marine Colonel Tony Rivera deployed his orbital assault teams using kinetic drop pods that were essentially controlled crashes. His soldiers fell from orbit in armored capsules, slamming into bioships at speeds that would kill anyone else. "Rivera to all drop teams," he called as his Marines prepared for insertion. "Hit them hard, hit them fast, and don't give them time to think." The drop pods punched through bioship hulls like bullets, delivering fully armed human soldiers directly into the enemy's heart. Dr. Chen's biological warfare teams deployed engineered viruses specifically designed to target Vexthul bioships. It was a level of biological warfare that made civilized species recoil in horror, but it was devastatingly effective against creatures that were part machine and part living tissue. The second planet killer fell when Chief Petty Officer Ryan Moore led a suicide mission directly into its core. He carried enough explosives to crack a small moon, riding a fighter loaded with every destructive device human engineers could fit into it. "Moore to fleet," he called as he approached the massive bioship. "Tell my wife I said hello." The explosion that followed lit up the star system like a second sun. When the light faded, the planet killer was gone. The last planet killer began broadcasting surrender signals, something that had never happened in Vexthul history. But the humans weren't accepting surrenders. Admiral Sullivan's final order was simple: finish it. The human fleet concentrated all their remaining firepower on the last planet killer. Railguns, missiles, fighters, and boarding teams hit it from every direction until it broke apart into burning fragments. In the aftermath, the alien observers realized they had witnessed something that would change galactic history forever. The Vexthul swarm, unstoppable for 1,000,000 years, had been completely destroyed by a species that had only reached space 50 years ago. The battle reached its climax when Admiral Sullivan gave the order that made every alien observer question everything they thought they knew about warfare. The human fleet had been carrying weapons that civilized species had banned thousands of years ago. Crude antimatter devices that could tear holes in the fabric of space itself. Captain Steve Wilson's missile cruiser Denver had already proven the weapons worked when he destroyed the first planet killer. Now Sullivan was authorizing their use against the entire remaining Vexthul fleet. "All ships, antimatter weapons are authorized," Sullivan broadcast calmly. "Show them what happens when you threaten Earth." The alien observers watching from their safe distances couldn't believe what they were hearing. Antimatter weapons weren't just destructive, they were unpredictable. A malfunction could destroy the ship, firing them along with everything else in the area. But the humans didn't seem concerned about the risks. Captain Amy Rodriguez loaded her destroyer Phoenix with antimatter charges and dove straight into the heart of the Vexthul formation. Her ship was already damaged from ramming attacks, her hull scarred and bleeding atmosphere, but she pressed forward anyway. "Rodriguez to all destroyers," she called over the squadron channel. "Follow me in. Let's end this." Her antimatter torpedo struck a bioship's neural cluster and created an explosion that bent light around it. The bioship didn't just die. It was erased from existence, leaving only a dark void where it had been. The Vexthul response was immediate and desperate. For the first time in their 1,000,000-year expansion, they began retreating. Their bioships turned away from the human fleet and tried to escape into hyperspace. But the humans weren't allowing retreats. Fighter Squadron Commander Linda Green led a pursuit that followed Vexthul ships into hyperspace itself. Her fighters emerged in enemy staging areas and began hunting down every bioship they could find. "Green to all pilots," she broadcast as they attacked a Vexthul nursery facility. "No survivors. Burn everything." Her pilots responded with the systematic efficiency of people who understood that this wasn't just a battle, It was an extermination. They weren't fighting to drive the Vexthul away. They were fighting to make sure they never threatened anyone again. Marine Colonel Tony Rivera's orbital assault teams had turned bioship capture into an art form. His soldiers dropped from orbit in armored pods that punched through enemy hulls like bullets, delivering fully equipped human Marines directly into the enemy's vital areas. "Rivera to all drop teams," he called as another wave of pods launched. "Establish beachheads and hold them. We're turning these things into human strongholds." The Marines didn't just destroy the bioships they boarded. They converted them into forward operating bases, using human engineering to turn enemy vessels into weapons platforms that could be used against other Vexthul forces. Dr. Lisa Chen's biological warfare teams had deployed viruses specifically engineered to target Vexthul bioships. The weapons violated every treaty about biological warfare that civilized species had ever signed, but they were devastatingly effective. "Chen to Fleet Command," she reported to Admiral Sullivan. "The viral agents are working better than expected. The bioships can't adapt fast enough to counter them. The Vexthul had evolved to fight energy weapons and kinetic attacks, but they had no defense against biological weapons designed by a species that had been fighting diseases for millions of years." Lieutenant Colonel Gary Phillips coordinated the final assault using human AI systems that had learned to predict Vexthul movements better than the creatures themselves could. The artificial intelligences were mapping enemy escape routes and cutting them off before the bioships could reach them. "Phillips to all units," he broadcast. "The AIs have identified 3 Vexthul escape vectors. We're sealing them now." Human. Ships moved to block every hyperspace exit point, trapping the remaining bioships in normal space where they could be hunted down systematically. Commander Alex Foster's boarding teams had developed new tactics that horrified alien military observers. Instead of trying to capture enemy vessels intact, they were rigging bioships with explosives and turning them into guided missiles aimed at other Vexthul forces. "Foster to all boarding teams," he called over the radio. "Package the neural clusters with maximum explosives. We're turning their own ships against them." Sergeant Kevin O'Brien led his squad through the corridors of another captured bioship, placing shaped charges throughout its nervous system. When they detonated, the ship would become a mindless weapon that would attack anything with Vexthul biosignatures. "O'Brien to Foster," he reported. "This one's ready to go. She'll hunt bugs for hours before the charges burn out." The converted bioship was released into a group of fleeing Vexthul vessels. Its own weapons turned against its former allies, creating chaos in the enemy formation. Major Claire Thompson's strategic weapons teams had moved beyond simple suicide attacks. They were now using their fighters as delivery systems for experimental weapons that pushed the boundaries of human technology. "Thompson to volunteer pilots," she announced. "We're testing the new quantum disruptors. No one knows what they'll do to bioships." Her pilots loaded their fighters with weapons that existed only in theoretical physics papers and flew them directly into enemy formations. The results were spectacular and terrifying. Chief Petty Officer Ryan Moore had survived his earlier suicide mission through luck and superior human engineering. Now he was leading a team of engineers who were converting captured Vexthul technology into weapons the creatures had never imagined. "More to engineering teams," he called over the radio. "We figured out how to turn their healing systems against them. Next bioship we board is going to eat itself alive." The human fleet had transformed from a desperate last stand into a systematic extermination campaign. They weren't just defeating the Vexthul. They were learning from them and using that knowledge to create new weapons. Captain Derek Murphy's heavy cruiser Yorktown had become a mobile weapons laboratory, its scientists working around the clock to develop new ways to kill bioships. His latest creation was a virus that turned Vexthul healing systems into weapons that destroyed their hosts from within. "Murphy to Fleet Command," he reported to Admiral Sullivan. "The new bioweapon is ready for deployment. One shot should take out an entire bioship cluster." Admiral Sullivan watched the tactical display as the last organized Vexthul formation fell apart under human attacks. The creatures that had terrorized the galaxy for 1,000,000 years were being hunted too. Extinction by a species they had never heard of 50 years ago. All ships, continue the pursuit, she ordered. I want every bioship found and destroyed. No exceptions. The human fleet spread out across multiple star systems, hunting down fleeing Vexthul with the patience of professional exterminators. They weren't just winning the battle, they were ensuring the war could never be fought again. Ambassador Krisa watched the final phase of the hunt from her observation ship, her tentacles wrapped around herself in shock. They're not stopping, she whispered to her aide. They're hunting every single one. Her aide studied the tactical displays with growing unease. Ma'am, the humans aren't just fighting a war, they're conducting a genocide. The last Vexthul bioship was cornered in a dead star system by 3 human destroyers. It broadcast surrender signals in every language it knew, but the humans weren't accepting surrenders. 3 months after the last Vexthul bioship was destroyed, the Galactic Council reconvened on Nexus Prime. The massive meeting chamber was quieter than it had ever been. Representatives from dozens of species sat around the circular table, but their usual chatter was replaced by nervous silence. Admiral Kate Sullivan entered the chamber wearing a uniform that bore new scars from personal combat. Her gray hair was shorter now, and there were lines around her eyes that hadn't been there before the war. Behind her walked Captain Jake Morrison, now promoted to Admiral, and Dr. Lisa Chen, whose biological warfare research had helped end the Vexthul threat forever. The statistics Sullivan presented to the Council were staggering. The human fleet had suffered 40% casualties in the campaign against the Vexthul. By galactic standards, those losses should have meant defeat and surrender. Instead, humans considered it an acceptable price for total victory. The Vexthul swarm has been completely eliminated, Sullivan reported in her calm, professional voice. Our task forces hunted down every bioship, every spawning facility, and every trace of their technology. The threat is gone. Admiral Zethkar studied the tactical reports with his reptilian features showing confusion. Admiral Sullivan, your species lost nearly half its space fleet. How do you consider this a victory? Sullivan's response made the entire chamber go silent. Admiral, we didn't lose half our fleet. We invested half our fleet in ensuring that no one else would ever face what we faced. That's what humans call a good trade. Ambassador Krisa's tentacles moved nervously as she spoke. Admiral, the Aquarian, Collective has analyzed your combat methods. Your people fought with a level of aggression that concerns many species. You're afraid of us, Morrison said bluntly, which made several alien representatives shift uncomfortably in their seats. We prefer the term respectfully cautious, replied Telvara, her crystal body flickering with uncertain light. Dr. Chen stepped forward with a data pad containing her final research report. If I may, I think I can explain why our methods were so effective. The Vexthul had evolved to fight civilized species that follow logical patterns and try to minimize casualties. Humans don't follow those patterns. She activated a holographic display that showed human combat footage alongside alien military doctrine. Every other species in the galaxy treats warfare as a last resort, something to be avoided if possible. Humans treat warfare as a tool, something to be mastered and perfected. Commander Velth, who had observed the entire human campaign, stood to address the council. The humans don't fight to survive, he said slowly. They fight to win. The difference is everything. Admiral Zethkar looked directly at Sullivan. What do your people want from the galaxy? Territory? Resources? Tribute? Sullivan's answer surprised everyone. We want target coordinates and resupply points. The chamber erupted in confused alien languages before Zethkar called for order. Explain. Morrison stepped forward. We've learned that this galaxy is full of species that have forgotten how to fight. The Vex Thule won't be the last threat you face. When the next one comes, you'll need predators to hunt them. You're offering to become our military? Asked Ambassador Creesa. We're offering to do what we do best, Sullivan replied. Protect people who can't protect themselves. The formal request came 3 days later. After extensive debate, the Galactic Council unanimously voted to offer humanity the position of Chief Military Coordination. The vote came not from gratitude, but from the practical recognition that they needed humans more than humans needed them. Captain Amy Rodriguez, promoted to admiral after her heroic actions in the war, now commanded the first human defense fleet stationed at the Galactic Core. Her ships patrolled space lanes with a reputation that made hostile forces think twice before attacking civilian targets. Colonel Sam Martinez had been promoted to general and commanded human marine bases established throughout the galaxy. His soldiers trained constantly, preparing for threats that other species couldn't imagine. Dr. Chen's research into biological warfare had been classified at the highest levels, but her defensive applications were shared with allied species. Her work on bioship immunity had saved countless lives during the final phase of the Vex Thule War. The galaxy's new guardians asked for no monuments, no special privileges, and no thanks. They asked only for the coordinates of threats and the supplies needed to eliminate them. Human ships now patrolled every major space lane in the galaxy. Their angular, weapon-covered vessels looked primitive compared to the elegant alien designs, but they carried crews who understood violence as an art form. Lieutenant Commander Rick Barnes commanded a forward listening post in the galaxy's outer rim, scanning for signs of new threats with equipment that never slept. His crew of volunteers considered perpetual vigilance a small price for galactic peace. Fighter pilot Johnny Hayes, now a squadron commander, led patrols that covered dozens of star systems. His pilots flew fighters that looked like metal predators, ready to respond to distress calls within minutes. The automated listening posts scattered throughout the galaxy broadcast a simple message in every known language. This system is under human protection. Hostile actions will result in immediate and total retaliation. Most alien species learned to recognize human ships by their distinctive profiles and gave them wide berths, not from hostility, but from healthy respect for beings who had turned warfare into a science. Admiral Morrison established his headquarters on a space station at the edge of known space, where human scouts monitored the galactic frontier for signs of new threats. His staff worked around the clock, analyzing potential dangers and preparing response plans. The few surviving records of the Vex Thule swarm contained a final transmission from their last queen ship before it was destroyed. The message was simple, but chilling. We thought we were the apex predators. We were wrong. There are things in this galaxy that hunt the hunters. Ambassador Creesa often thought about that message as she watched human patrol ships pass her homeworld. The Aquarian Collective was safer now than it had ever been, protected by beings who understood that sometimes the greatest peace came from the threat of overwhelming violence. The galaxy had learned an important lesson. In a universe full of prey species, having predators as guardians was the difference between survival and extinction. Human children born after the war grew up in a galaxy where their species was both feared and respected. They learned from an early age that freedom wasn't free, and that someone had to be willing to pay the price in blood to keep civilized worlds safe. Years passed, and other threats emerged from the dark spaces between stars. Each time, human fleets responded with the same systematic efficiency that had destroyed the Vex Thule. Pirates learned to avoid human patrol routes. Aggressive species reconsidered their expansion plans when they learned humans would respond. The galaxy's new guardians never asked for gratitude, but they received something more valuable: the knowledge that their children would grow up in a universe where the strong protected the weak and where predators hunted only other predators. In the depths of space, automated human beacons continued their endless watch, crewed by volunteers who understood that eternal vigilance was the price of galactic peace. They asked only for target coordinates and the ammunition to do their job properly. The aliens no longer looked on in fear as humans entered the fight. Now they looked on with relief, knowing that somewhere in the darkness, humanity's guardians were hunting the things that hunted everyone else.